I gotta make sure the stream is running and all that stuff.
Sure.
Maybe tweet my parents and let them know that their son's live.
Right. Do they watch you?
That's a good question. I don't think so.
Yeah. I assume your parents are Christian?
Yeah, definitely conservative, born again.
Yeah.
My mom actually told me that when my dad watches, he gets too sad, so he can't watch.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah. Do they belong to a specific denomination?
Yeah, Mennonite. You'd like them.
Why is that?
I sense you're like you lean pacifistic, am I right?
Yep.
Yeah, Mennonite's very pacifistic.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually don't know much about the Mennonite denomination, to be honest.
Yeah, my whole family, Mennonites. I say they're a pacifistic religion, but a lot of them are farmers, have guns, and probably would defend their family if they had to.
For being honest, who wouldn't?
Well, I had a pastor tell me that I asked him if when I was, I think, 15, I asked my pastor if I get older and get married and have a family and someone comes to the door and wants to do harm to my family, what am I supposed to do?
Right.
And my pastor said, you let that person kill you and your family because your salvation is assured. You're a
Right.
Christian, Doug. Your family's probably going to be Christian. And so you die because if you kill the intruder,
Right.
you might be giving them a sentence to hell. So the brand of Mennonite that I was raised in believed in eternal conscious torment. Sure. And it makes sense too. If you believe in eternal if you believe in eternal conscious torment, you should be a pacifist and let people kill you, rather than you kill them, because they can still come to Christ. And
right, it does make sense. Yeah, I absolutely see why they would say that, because in a way you're doing them a favor under that scenario, right? Because you're giving them a chance to not burn in hell forever.
Right. Now, if you're a Calvinist, I don't think most Mennonites are not Calvinists. In fact, I don't think any of them are. But if you're Calvinist, then that doesn't apply because, well, those Calvinists, they have an answer for everything.
They're than not, yeah.
Exactly. Let me just give out Michael RCH. Is that all you do? Is sit and wait for me to go live? You're here first again. 1,000 Pine Points. Once you reach 1 million Pine Points, Jared, I will pay for an all-expense paid trip to Las Vegas with me at the luxurious Tropicana Casino and Spa.
I don't know how to take that, how serious you're being, but I'll probably pass if I get that many points.
Okay. Why don't you tell me and people who you are, just generally, and what type of Christian you are. I know that sounds kind of rude to say what type of Christian, but right. you know what I mean, right?
I think I know what you mean. Yeah. My name's Jared, and I like to bicker with Doug on Facebook a lot. Don't know what I'm doing here actually, but I like talking with him. So I'm 32 years old. I'm married. We don't have any kids. I work for a company as a tech support agent, where it's kind of a cool company. We sell these like in-zone camera towers where it's like a coaching tool. It puts a camera up like 30 feet in the air, aims down at the field. And
what type of field? Like you're talking football? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Huh. and we have like replay technology and stuff. It's pretty cool. So I do a lot of the tech support for that, our products, right? And I do other stuff like manage our website and stuff like that. But yeah, as we were talking before it went live, I love running. I've been an endurance athlete for most of my life. I actually did a triathlon pretty competitively for a number of years, doing like Ironmans, half Ironmans, those sorts of triathlon events. So yeah.
Did you ever
go ahead. Sorry.
Did you ever try out for the university track team or anything?
Yeah. So I'm from Illinois, and then I lived in Colorado for a few years where I met my wife. But so I went to Southern Illinois University in Illinois, and it's like in Carbondale. It's the southern, the bottom part of Illinois. And so like, I think most people would say I'm a pretty decent runner. I'm not like bragging or anything, but just, compared to the general public. But at that school, I was like the worst. And it was kind of like a Rudy situation where I just sort of like hung out and ran with the team, but I wasn't actually on the team,
Okay.
until like the last year. And the coach was just like, go ahead, Jared, you can run. And just sort of a pity, thing. And I ran on the team cross country my senior year. But, it was more just like he appreciated my dedication. And, remember how in Rudy, he was like the last game, he's just like, go ahead, Rudy, we're winning like 50-0. Go ahead and just give a few plays.
You mentioned earlier that you like sparring with me on a Facebook group. Why don't you tell people what that Facebook group is?
Yeah, wrestling with the disturbing parts of Scripture.
Yeah, I've mentioned that Facebook page often on my live streams, so I just want people to know that's a real Facebook group. And it's very interesting to me as an atheist watching that discussion between, like, there's different brands, versions of Christianity going on there.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's interesting to see how some Christians just say, "Oh, all this makes sense. Don't worry about it. God is a God of love, and if He wants to do the X, He can do it." And others say, "Well, but wait a minute. How do we know God actually did that?" And so to watch Christians kind of wrestle with this, and I
feel the same way.
Yeah, I try to respectfully stay out of most of it, but you and I started talking back and forth on. I think I asked you a week ago or 2 weeks ago, why do I need the gospel?
Right.
And we went back and forth on that for a while. And we both agreed at the end that the most important thing first to figure out is whether or not it's true.
Right.
And so that's why let's talk about that. But first of all, some people in the live stream chat want a little more detail on you. Were you born and raised in Christianity? Was it later on? Okay. Yeah. What denomination?
So, right. Born and raised like non-denominational. I think we went to a Baptist church for a little. I don't remember it at all. I was so young. And very early on, we switched to a church that technically was apostolic, I guess, whatever that means. But they soon changed to just it was just Christian Fellowship Church, right? And just completely non-denominational. I would say evangelical with a capital E, and all the usual stuff like young Earth creationism. It probably was Calvinistic, although I didn't really think about it at the time. Or no, maybe it was like Arminian. Who knows? I don't know. I don't remember. And so I only ever went to non-denominational churches for the majority of my life until recently. Now I'm going to an Anglican church, like high Anglican, not Episcopal. So I mean, for the majority of my life, I believed in that the earth was only 6,000 years old. You got to take the Bible completely literally. And there, if you don't mentally assent to Jesus Christ during your life, then you're going to burn in hell forever. That was my life.
So you no longer believe any of that. Now you're transitioned to an old earth creationist evolution.
I mean, I affirm evolution.
Okay.
Yeah.
And yeah, because that's to go from evangelical, non-denominational to Anglican. That's a big difference, right?
It is. It is a very big difference. Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause it's very Catholic in some ways.
Was this? I always have a theory. Is this between the ages of 18 and 22, or is that much later in life?
I mean, this is like within the past 2 years.
Oh, really?
I only started going to the Anglican church this year. Yeah.
And how long ago did you get married?
2015. Yeah.
Is your wife Anglican?
Nah.
Oh, so you both just decided a couple years ago to make that transition?
There's some personal stuff there that I probably don't want to talk about without
Okay.
her permission.
Gotcha. No worries. No worries. Okay. So let's talk about Christianity and why you think it's true and why I think it's not true.
Sure.
Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Why don't you go first? I'm going to be honest. I haven't really watched much of your live stream stuff. I mean, little snippets here and there, but I actually don't know much about you. Can you give like just a super brief background?
Born and raised Mennonite Christian to age 15, kind of left Mennonite church at that time. I was actually the first Mennonite to be fully immersed. Usually they do the sprinkling for baptism. So I was a trendsetter, but then shortly thereafter, I left the Mennonite church, went to non-denomination, to Pentecostal, to Seeker Sensitive, to Calvary Chapel, to Presbyterian. 30 years Christian, left, started to doubt in my mid-30s, and deist by 40 and atheist by 41.
Wow. Quite the journey.
Yeah. But the reason why I don't think Christianity is true, and the reason why I started doubting in the first place in my mid-30s, is mostly because I started asking the what's more likely question. And I lowered my fear of hell or consequences of being wrong, and also lowered my love for Jesus and saying, people love many false things.
Sure.
So I just try to get myself as objective as possible. And once you do that, then you can start asking the what's more likely question, that the Gospels give a reliable portrayal of a man who did all these amazing things, rose from the dead, or that it's a story mostly written based on the template of the Old Testament and some other texts. And once you can do that, lower your defenses, get your emotions out of it, and see what's going on with the Old Testament parallels and so forth, you can say, these are brilliant authors, and they wrote a great story. And not to say all of it's false, not to say all of it's non-historical, but probably a lot of it is. I actually did a video on the book of Mark, Gospel of Mark, and what I thought was historical and what isn't. And I would say I think 10% of it's historical at best. So that's basically it in a nutshell. I think it's a great moral story of love. If you're looking at the best parts of Christianity, it's a story of love, a story of sacrifice, a story of redemption, a story of even pacifism.
Right.
But the core proposition I think most Christians would say makes Christianity true is whether or not Jesus rose from the dead bodily. I would say that
didn't happen.
The evidence, I wouldn't say that did not happen with 100% certainty, but I would say that the evidence for it doesn't even come close to warrant that type of claim.
Right. Would you say, are you kind of the mind that because we don't typically see miracles like that happen?
Yeah, and definitely, I think you can even assume a God exists and still make that claim that, you know what? It doesn't seem like Yahweh has the propensity to raise people from the dead very often. And so, so even if God is real and true and can do miracles, that doesn't mean a man named Jesus who lived 2,000 years ago said, "Hey, look, everyone, I'm God. Yahweh's going to raise me from the dead, or I'll raise myself, however you want to view it." That doesn't make it any more likely. And that's actually the key point, which a guy named Camille and we had a video where we talked about this, that even historians or theologians will admit this is the toughest part, is like, why even have this idea that God would want to do this? And people just, like the evangelical Christian in me would just scream out, well, it's obvious because he's God in flesh and he's son of God and he's doing all these things, and this would confirm everything he said, and he predicted his own death and resurrection. But you're assuming all that stuff's true to begin with, right? You're kind of begging the question at that point. And so.
Well, wouldn't the answer typically be that why God would want to do that is if the act of embodying flesh and then dying and then resurrecting is to defeat the curse of death so that all can be raised. I mean, wouldn't that just be the reason?
Could be, but it seems like there's been prophets before Jesus that wanted to defeat death and get closer to the truth of God. And it seemed like God didn't raise them.
Right, but well, I guess I'm not quite sure what you're talking about, but isn't the idea though that it has to be through a perfect human that is one with God that must suffer the pain of death and then be raised? Like, isn't that just the joke?
Well, the thought that pops in my head is, was Jesus' body perfect? Because that's the only thing that died and rose again.
Not his body, but in terms of living the sinless life in perfect communion with God.
Yeah, but still, why would God raise a person who has a sinless life?
Well, so I guess the idea is that it's one of union, and so if you go back to creation in Genesis, right? God creates the earth and establishes this garden, and the garden is sort of like the temple, right? It's symbolic of the temple idea. And the temple idea is that that's the place where heaven and earth meet, And so you have this place where God wants to meet us, to be in union with us. And so it's through that, that God wants to bring his creation up into him. And of course, though, the problem is the fall. And so that severs that connection. And so there's this long narrative leading up to where, God is going to be able to fix the problem by bringing that union back together. And it's through a different temple this time, and it's through Jesus.
Right. But this is how when the Jewish person would say redemption is done through repentance, through coming humbly before God and saying, forgive me.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need a perfect man walking around, and you don't need a perfect man to die and then rise again in bodily form. It says in the Old Testament that if you want to be reconciled, redeemed, you come before God and you ask for forgiveness. And he will restore you. The Old Testament is the story of the Israelites saying, God, we need you. And God says, okay, right. Here I am. And then they disappoint God and they do their own thing. And then they say, oh, God, we need you. And it's just back and forth the whole time, right?
Right. Yeah.
But every time God says, look, if you just turn from your wicked ways and follow me, I will forgive you. And that's right. That. And so,
and I think that's true. That's still true. But I don't think the story of Jesus, the gospel, is saying that actually wasn't true until this. I think that's always been true, that God will forgive you.
But let's talk about Christianity specifically, though. What, like you made the comment that Jesus had to be perfect or sinless. Why do you think he was?
Just based on the tradition, of the scripture and the church tradition. I don't know if you wanted me to expand on that.
Well, it's I could ask you questions like, how confident are you that tradition is always true? And you say, well, not confident. You know, tradition is often
Yeah.
false, and that's why we call it tradition, because we're looking through the back mirror and we're moving
Sure.
on. um,
Yeah.
so, like, to me, I'm thinking, to say a man who walked this planet was perfect in all he did and said, even that, like, perfect compared to what? Um, what evidence do we have that that's true?
Yeah.
Besides, we got tradition, but
Sure.
so there's a lot of false beliefs I think you and I agree on are false that
Yeah.
are based on tradition.
No. Yeah. I hear you. It's definitely a problem for us Christians. Yeah.
Like for a lot of the Christians in the Facebook group we're in, they'll say, Doug, it says that Jesus was perfect.
Right.
What more do you want?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of, I mean, this is pretty cliche, but a lot of people will go to the martyrs, um, and what reason would there be for martyring themselves if they didn't think it was true?
yeah, and when I was a Christian, that was a big one. Not for me so much, but for my friends. We would talk about our
Yeah.
doubts with each other, and for my friends, they would always go to martyrdom, and I understand why you just can't compare it to like the 9/11 martyrs and so forth.
Right.
But do we even know that number one, the first generation Christians were martyred, like the ones in 60 AD, 65 AD, by the time, like they would have died of natural causes around 70, 80 AD at least. And do we know that they were actually martyred and said, look, either you recant or we're going to kill you?
Right.
We don't even know
Well,
that.
yeah. I mean, you are banking on the historical record being true to at least some extent. But that's kind of the problem with anything in history, especially when you go back to a certain point.
Yep.
How do we know anything is not propaganda? Um,
Right. And
yeah,
there's a lot of
history
history.
is written by those who win.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where we have this huge claim of Jesus being perfect and dying and rising again as God's representative or God in flesh, whatever your view is. And it's based on what we know. I think we can say the word no, that a lot of history is propaganda. And so how can we be confident that this is true?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, someone smarter than me could probably answer that question better. But I mean, I think in some ways, for me, what kind of helps is I think about theism in general. And, I'm pretty convinced that theism is true more so than Christianity. And
How much more do you think? Like, could you put a number on it?
no, I don't know. I don't know.
Because I used to be the same way, and I've asked this question even to historians. I think I asked this to Mike Lacona. No, who was it? I forget who it was, but it was like a prominent Christian apologist, and he said my confidence in God is like 99%, but my confidence in Christianity is 85%. I think it was Mike Lacona, and that really shocked me that a Christian apologist admitted that their confidence in Christianity was that much lower.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to keep in mind though that when I say theism, I don't just mean like a God that just creates the world, full stop. When I say theism, I think we've talked about this before, but I'm kind of functioning on the tradition of classical theism, where there's all the omnis involved, and there's just so much that goes into what that understanding is. But one of them is that this assumption that God is all good and is love. And so if you think about the idea of love being intrinsic to God, then I think the Trinitarian model is essential to who God is. Like, there has to be a self-giving, this kind of synergistic self-giving of love within God himself, or itself, however you want to say it. And so anyway, the point being is that what I see in the story of Christianity, of the Father begetting the Son, and the Son giving to the Father. Obviously, that's metaphorical in a pretty strong sense, but that reflects what I see God must be if theism is to be true. Whereas with other traditions, I don't see that as much, and so there's kind of some loose ends there.
I see you're still I think I know what you're saying, but when you first started talking, I thought you were kind of pulling away from specific Christianity and going to general theism. But then as soon as you mentioned Trinity, it seems like you're right back into Christianity. Like why?
Not necessarily. I mean, you don't have to have Christianity to have some sort of Trinitarian theism. It could just be something, imagine the Bible is never written and you still like reasoned to God in some sort of Thomas Aquinas way, and say, well, God must be this. You don't have to say Trinitarian. You could say binitarian, some sort of pure existence itself that must be self-giving within itself, since love is the fabric of reality. Like if you were to go that way.
Yeah, I can understand that, but then it almost seems like you're shifting into polytheism or pantheism, or I don't know. But let's get back to Christianity. If you understand my point of view, and when you said to me a couple weeks ago, or when I asked you, why do I need the gospel? If knowing that I don't believe Christianity is true to begin with,
mm-hmm.
And knowing that here's the reasons why, and I very basically laid it out. Why, where would I go from here? Would you recommend okay, Doug, forget about Christianity. Just start believing in God, for goodness sakes. Like, is that where you would go, or what?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would probably start with, talking to you about, do we at least affirm that there are transcendentals, like in the article I wrote, like, is there really such a thing as goodness or love? That's not just something we invented through, biological evolutionary mechanisms, right?
My answer to that would be maybe, but unless we can figure out what exactly it is and how we can know what it is, it's irrelevant. Otherwise, it's just this idealistic utopia in our minds of something to shoot for that is...
Well, it's very Platonistic, right?
It's
sort of like, yeah.
So at that point, and then I would ask questions like chimpanzees, like, do they have this idea of good and love and empathy?
No, yeah.
And how far? What about mice? What about snakes? And
right.
And I remember as a Christian going to the zoo, and it would frighten me because I would see behaviors in monkeys that I would see in my own family.
Right. Yeah. No. Totally.
Yeah, and I'm going, okay, where's the God in this?
I used to have a problem with that too, but you've probably found that I'm very sympathetic to Plato in a lot of things I say. I guess like maybe you could classify me as a Christian Platonist, but I would caveat that because there's a lot of Platonism that I think is incompatible with Christianity and that I don't like. But anyway, the point being that there's this idea that that he took from, was it Socrates, the four causes, or Aristotle, or maybe Aristotle took that from Plato. I'm all over the place. But how things can have like a final cause, whoever came up with that. And so what is the good for that being, right? And so like for a dog, what is the good for a dog? And it's to be a dog, right? To run around and play and eat and whatnot. And
just like me.
Yeah, just like me too.
Run around, play, and
Yeah,
eat.
yeah, and go fetch. And for humans, what is the good for a human? And for apes, maybe the good for them is very similar to the good for a human. But just, they have their own being while we have our own being. I'm probably being extremely too abstract here, but do you kind of get where I'm going with that?
Yeah, but for my personality type, for the type of guy I am, I'll just kind of say, so what? What does it matter? It seems like a lot of this idea of the good we can sort of figure out through trial and error, and I think that's how we got to the morality we are today, to be honest. I was going to ask you, you mentioned something earlier, oh yeah, about the omnis,
Hmm.
which is very Platonic, right?
Yeah, I mean it's classical. That's how I would say. Yeah.
I've been watching a lot of open theism. Do you know what that is?
Yeah. Hmm.
I've been watching a lot of debates between open theists and Calvinists and open theists and
Sure.
Arminians, and it the open theist made a great point. He says, "Is it even biblical, the idea that God is all knowing?"
Right. Yeah.
And even some other omnis, and and that God is outside of time. Like, where in the Bible does it say God's outside of time?
Right.
Isn't there more evidence in the Bible that God's locked in time, either in time that as we know it or in sequence? And I thought that was a great point. That I think if you take your view, you're in a way going against Scripture, because
Right. Yeah.
the,
No,
the,
you're correct there. Yeah.
the God you're describing is not found in the Old Testament, definitely.
No, not at all. Yeah. Yeah. No, and that would take some defending, which I didn't prepare to do, so I'm not going to do that. But,
Okay.
uh, but yeah, I mean, there's this idea of God being both transcendent and immanent, right? So transcendent being kind of outside or above, and immanent being within. And I think classical theists would say that God is both. He is both transcendent and immanent, both, kind of above and beyond, but also within. Um, so have you ever heard of like panentheism? Panentheism?
Yeah.
I can't say it. Yeah.
Panentheism.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's right. That, there's this distinction between the creature and the creator, but also God is sort of in all, in a sense. I should send you a video by this theologian. Her name is Eleanor Stump, and she does a really great job of kind of um, giving an argument for how God can be this omni God who is outside of time, but also, interact in time. And her claim is that God doesn't know the future,
Right.
but he does know the now, like the present. But for God, because he's so beyond, our comprehension and outside of time, all of time is his eternal now, his eternal presence. So she gives the example of like in the book of Jonah, where it does very clearly say, God tells Jonah, if the Ninevites do this, then this will happen.
It's a failed
Right?
prophecy.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And she, I can't quite remember everything she says, but
Yeah, it's basically God told Jonah to tell the Ninevites that unless you do this, I'm going to wipe you out. And they actually repent, and they're not wiped out.
right.
And so God, through Jonah, prophesied something. That prophecy failed to come to the pass because God didn't know that they were going to repent,
That's right.
and was happy that when they did, and said, "Oh, I changed my mind. I'm not going to wipe you guys out."
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So she gives the example of the flat world story. Have you heard of that? Where you have like two-dimensional characters who are interacting with each other in flat world, and then some three-dimensional character starts interacting with them, and so what they see looks like nonsense to them, because this three-dimensional character, like if you have a flat plane and then it moves, and you would see a point right when I hit the paper, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it would get bigger, and then it would shrink back down, right, as I pass through it, right? And like if I was to send like a pencil through the paper, but in the flat world, what they would see is just this like growing shape, opening and closing, but that's not what it is at all, and they wouldn't be able to comprehend. Anyway, the point of that is just that, for the flat world people, what they see, they just can't understand.
Where the flat world and God's or the transcendent nature is the pencil.
Right. Yeah. So it's a three-dimensional object that these two-dimensional creatures just could never comprehend because they only know the two-dimensional world.
Well, Jared, I'll tell you my problem. My problem is I was born and raised on a farm, very practical. If you don't shovel the manure, it's going to start to stink.
Yeah.
And so the philosophical ideas are great to, when you have a cigar or a pipe and you're, chilling on a late Friday night with a good beverage, tasty beverage. For that, I love philosophy. But for my everyday life, I don't need it. It doesn't matter. I don't think, the core propositions of the New Testament or the Old Testament are true. Even if there's a transcendent nature, like I said, it means nothing to me unless I can know what it is or have a reliable way of figuring out what it is. And so now I'm stuck with this whole problem of just basically saying, so what? It's I don't feel I need.
I think I would challenge that. I mean, I feel like we do rely on the transcendent. It doesn't have to be God, like Yahweh, but we live our lives loving each other or hating each other, which is the absence of love. And we, being the creatures that we are, we seem to sense that we do exist. That's weird. Right?
I agree with you if you're defining transcendent as something that spans across all of humanity, but is not outside of humanity, like not this cosmic, godlike transcendence. But I'm not sure which transcendence you're talking about now.
Well, we don't know that because I've talked to you about this before, but like the whole idea of truth, that seems to be transcendent. We seem to think that truth is truth, like it's with a capital T. Things are just necessarily true, but
you're talking about reality, right? It's
right. And so the question becomes well, to accept that there is such a thing as truth, you also already have to affirm it. You have to affirm that truth is true in order to say that anything is true.
Yeah.
So it is a circular argument, and we cannot escape that. And that's kind of, at some point, we're just kind of left thinking, well, either that transcendent is real, or everything is just absurd. Like it's just, we have these rational thoughts, but there's no guarantee that they're actually rational.
Well, this is why I have a master's degree in analytical chemistry, and someone asked me the other day, do you think that played any part of how you think and that you're not a Christian today? And I said, yes, because it was drilled into me, reproducibility, testing, falsifying. And so this whole idea of truth, and I do believe in absolute truth. I believe it's absolutely true that I'm not your God or not a God who's omniscient. But there's so many times in history that what we thought was true, we end up finding out it wasn't true. And so even though it can be absolutely true that there's this reality out there, the important part for me is trying to figure out what it is in a reliable way. So we're not fooling ourselves.
Yeah.
And
but
being
you're
open to
talking
the
about,
change.
right. But you're talking about specific truths, but you're using this abstract transcendental truth to, you know, drill down to those specific truths. So like, we used to think the Earth was the center of the universe, and that turned out to be false through repeatable observations and whatnot, the scientific method. But there was still this idea that something is true.
Mm-hmm.
It's either it is or it isn't. And that's sort of like it sort of sits above us in a way that
I agree.
there is this truth.
I agree. That's a good. It's like if you were to graph it, I think truth is a horizontal line on the top, and time is the x-axis. And as time goes by, our knowledge of truth goes up. But I don't think we'll ever hit the line of truth. I think
right.
I think we'll have
perfect. That's a great illustration.
We'll have an asymptote.
Although it often, for certain people, certain groups it dips and kind of.
Like young Earth creationists or what?
Yeah, like Republicans.
I like to keep my live streams like as real as possible and as practical as possible. So if you were like, why aren't you me? And say, you know what? Let's just say I don't know if there's these transcendental whatever, like what the nature of it is. And just be open to changing our mind about it. Why isn't your confidence as low as mine on Christianity, for example? Like, what would you say to that?
Yeah. Well, I think, I kind of start at theism in a way. It's kind of paradoxical because I sort of start at both. I don't know how to say it. It's kind of hard to explain, but here, I'll just try and move forward. But the very fact that there's existence at all, that we have being in us, to me, I just feel like that in itself, I'm going to use this word very delicately, proves. I don't mean that in the way many might think I mean that, but proves that there's more, there's something transcendent, right? And it does kind of go back to, like, when I say prove, I mean in the philosophical way. There's like the Aristotelian proof of the unmoved mover, right? And I think he was right, basically. And I just can't escape that.
Okay, but that's a great answer. Or I think I know where you're coming from. And the way I handle that is to say, you know what? Sure, there could have been a first mover. However, there could have been something completely material, maybe not of our time, space, and matter, but outside our time, space, and matter, but still material, that's eternal, cyclical even. I don't know.
But that's a problem. That's a problem within the proof, that there's something that's not ultimately simple and is material, and basically something that has potentiality.
I don't buy that at all.
Why not? Just curious.
Because I think we're talking about things that we're pretending to know that we don't know. I think it's outside our ken to postulate, oh no, this is impossible. You cannot have something material exist forever.
Yeah, but to me that kind of just sounds like the Calvinist who says, like, God elects people to burn in hell forever, and that's good. And it's like, well, how is that good? And it's just like, well, we don't know. It just is.
But you remember your flat paper analogy, or the 2D, 3D? Yeah. To me, this is what we're talking about right now. We're the 2D, and why is there something rather than nothing is the 3D coming in towards us. And we're kind of trying to figure out what in the world is this. And so that's my position. My position is it's okay to say, I don't know. And if I was to say, no, it has to be something immaterial, for me, I'm saying I would be dishonest to say that, because how in the world would I know that it has to be this way?
Yeah, but I mean, for the like, I don't know how well this is going to succeed, but for the two-dimensional people, they still see something, and they can reason that there's, well, this did, this thing that we saw, that we perceive, has an explanation. And then they might be able to ascertain certain things from that. Now that's a very different example than what I'm speaking of right now with the whole unmoved mover argument. But the unmoved mover argument is really, it's an argument about change, and by change we mean from potentials to actuals.
Yeah,
And
that doesn't convince me one bit. It's
yeah.
it's similar to like, is God outside of time? I would say no. Like, if I put myself in, even in the Christian worldview or the Judaic Christian worldview, this whole idea that God can sort of escape this problem, I don't think it, posing even an immaterial, escapes the problem of why is there something rather than nothing. Like, does God ever sit back and wonder, why do I exist? Like, why am I here?
Yeah, I mean, but that's like a different category.
Yes,
So
it's a different category, but so is maybe something material. That's also a different category, but still material.
if it's material, though, then it's composed of parts. Therefore, it has like a potentiality. Where, in the classical theist tradition, God is pure actuality. So
Yeah,
he's not composed of parts.
I like when you say those words. I think I know exactly where you're going, but I'll just tell you,
Yeah.
it's like it doesn't resonate with me one bit. Not as tight.
Sure.
In my opinion, when I hear those type
I get
of,
that.
yeah, when I hear those arguments, I'll be very honest with you. I'm hearing, I'm judging people as, I really want to believe that Jesus Christ rose from the dead, so I have hope of eternity or whatever, and therefore I love this argument. And that's,
I can see why you have that perspective. I don't think that's what I'm doing.
yeah, I'm
And
not
the
saying
question
you.
was
You're
direct-
different.
Yeah, the question was directed at me, and so I wasn't saying like, this is what
Yeah.
you need to, you need to follow this in order to. It was just you were just asking me, why do I still think it's true, or
But
why am I not like you? And for me, I just can't get past that thought of ultimate being. And
okay. Let's start there, and let's say you're right that there has to be something transcendent, immaterial, that caused the actuality of the material, the first mover. Let's assume all that's true. I guess the point after that is, how does that help you? Why would I even care about it?
yeah,
Because we're still stuck with the epistemology part, right? It's
right, yeah. I hate epistemology.
yeah, you're an ontological type guy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, no, I mean, I hate it because you're right. It's hard, and I don't know if I know how to answer that.
Because if you look at
You
your
know,
life and look at my life,
Mhm.
my guess is we're pretty similar in how we treat people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so,
I mean, you probably don't agree with this, but I credit that to, the influence of Christianity throughout
that's
the ages, and so I hate it when Christians are like, look at all these, godless liberals, in America, and they characterize non-believers as this enemy, and I'm like, yeah, but your life doesn't really look that much different to theirs, and honestly, I think that's a good thing in some ways, that we don't look like an ancient Roman culture that saw women and children as sexual slaves, and they weren't equal. The idea of equality was ridiculous. It was like, you're telling me this slave is equal to me, like has the same value as me? Like, no. I think Christianity, not the only religion, but certainly did play a major part in the West in bringing about a change for the better.
Like what I've been hearing from some apologists lately, and even guys like Jordan Peterson, and tell me if you agree with this.
Yeah, Peterson, he does say that stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that even if Christianity is false, we got to try hard to believe it because society
right,
needs it. Uh,
right.
Is that sort of your same sentiment?
Um, that's a hard question to answer, just because I just can't get past that part that theism is true, right? um, which has so many implications. If since I am very convinced that theism is true,
But general
there's just
theism doesn't help society at all. It's like once you get into the bare nuts of bolts and nuts of it.
for me it does though,
How's that?
because well, when you start looking at the implications of general classical theism, if you do come to the conclusion that it's true, you do start deriving certain things from it. And one of the derivations is that God is love. And the implications of that are that, his creation are sort of infused with love as well. Otherwise,
How
you
did
have
you
problem.
get from a transcendent, non-material
Yeah.
something to love?
I can't, I'm not smart enough to go through all that right now.
Because couldn't it be
Um,
true that what we call evil, an evil, transcendent, immaterial something created our universe?
yeah, I think no, it can't be. It can't be because of,
But look at the evidence.
um,
We see so much evil and suffering in the world. Wouldn't that make more sense?
I don't think so. But again, man, it's really hard to explain. I feel like I just have to direct you to some really good videos where I know a guy who goes through a series. It's really difficult to get through, but he kind of, takes you on the journey of like, okay, theism is true, and then what can we derive from that, and then ends up where I'm landing.
Yeah,
And to me, it makes sense, and I think he's right.
well, I think it makes sense to people who were raised in a certain culture to say God is love when it's been drilled in them since the day they were born. Like if we just assume Satan was the supreme God and Yahweh was the fallen angel, everything would be flipped. But we would still have the first mover explanation of why there's something rather than nothing. So I don't know how you can get from this
Yeah,
Platonic
I guess
idea to
right. I
love.
guess what you're saying there, the problem that I have with that, it kind of goes back to this idea of like, well, then we really can't trust our rationality at that point at all.
Sure, you
Um,
could.
how well then it's kind of like good is actually bad, you
Well,
know?
it would be you would still have cause and effect. It'd explain why when you have a marker and you let go of it, it will fall because
Right.
the evil God wanted uniformity. Now, I agree with you when it comes to morality. This God could say, "I don't care." When it comes to morals, you guys do what you want, and that seems like we got a lot of evil, pain, and suffering in the world. The real problem would be the problem of good. So why is there good in the world if this is an
Right.
evil creator? And then we could say, well, maybe this evil creator wanted free will. He wanted people to freely be evil. And so he put a tree in the garden, and if they ate from it,
Yeah.
they would see their goodness.
Well, yeah. I think the problem with that though is that if you're talking about like a libertarian free will, I think we can say pretty we can say with pretty good certainty that that kind of free will has to be false. I guess let me ask you: do you affirm libertarian free will?
No,
Okay,
I'm not saying it's impossible, but to me, libertarian free will is basically akin to randomness or arbitrary,
exactly.
being
Yep,
arbitrary. Yeah.
that's the problem, and you can't escape that. So, I mean, I feel like that sort of defeats that problem.
But let's apply
Um,
that to love. Is there a reason why God is love, or is it arbitrary?
well, it kind of goes back to just that pure actuality that God is. There's he is, explanation itself in that sense. And so, it kind of goes back to saying it's kind of like necessity, right? Like God is.
Yeah, it's a brute fact at that point, right?
Right.
God is what he is, but then there's no reason,
Right.
and it's the same as libertarian free will. It's arbitrary. It just is what it is, and I think that's a problem for theists. Well, no, it's not a problem, but it's something that they have to, I think, give to non-theists or atheists like myself. Okay, if we have brute facts, I guess, Doug, we have to allow you to have the brute fact that the universe just exists and has the properties that it has, and that we can learn things about it. And so if someone were to ask, Doug, where did the universe or cosmos, everything material come from? And I'll say, well, it's just a brute fact. It just is what it is. Like you say, God is love is what it is.
Right. Yeah. I guess the difference for me, this is good. This is why I want to have this conversation. It gives me good things to think about so I can try to write them out and be clear about where I'm trying to come from.
I'm making you a stronger theist.
Yeah, no, I think these conversations do. Because, I think, it should be good to have some people who are Christians be able to explain their position and not just be like, oh, yeah. But so the idea of a brute fact that's just a brute fact, I think is problematic because, again, you have this problem where, like if it's a material thing that just pops, right? It has no explanation.
Doesn't pop. It's just always existed.
Yeah. But then you have sort of this problem of like, well, how do you explain, not in terms of time, but just in terms of the here and now, like the regression of like my hand is made of skin and bone and flesh. And, those parts are made of smaller parts. And
well, if it's a Christian, if it's a Christian asking me that, I would say, well, the same problem is for your God, because nowhere in the Old Testament does it say God's outside of time. It says he's eternal, but not outside of time. So God has thoughts if he's a personal God, and he has a sequential line of thoughts. And this is how the open theists talk. And so so basically that infinite regress of, oh, that's a big dog.
Yeah, real big. Hey, Jack, hey, come here.
Is that a Doberman?
No.
Oh.
Hey, come here. Sorry.
Oh, you got two of them.
Yeah. A big one and a real little one. Yeah, so I guess the difference there is that, what we're talking about when we say God is being itself, not a being, right? So it's like the fundamental underlying foundation or source of all reality, where that's a problem for what we would call brute facts. So in that case, being is just being. It just is. It's not actually a brute fact. And that's something where I'm not explaining it well. I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be doing this.
Well, let's change it up. I'm actually very curious what you actually believe. I don't know if you want to. I've done speed rounds with apologists and historians before. Would you be willing to, without any explanation, just say if you believe it or not? And you can do it back. You can do it back to me too if you want.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Do you believe there was a literal Adam and Eve?
No.
Okay. Do you believe that God actually commanded the killing of women and children, the Amalekites, the Canaanites?
No.
Okay. Do you believe that the Jews actually were exiled into Egypt or made slaves in Egypt?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you believe there was 12 disciples?
Yes.
Okay. Do you believe that Jesus actually walked on water?
I want to say yes, but that's another one where maybe.
Do you believe Jesus actually exorcise demons out of people.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So do you believe that Jesus took demons out of the guy and they ran it and it went into pigs and the pigs flew off the cliff?
Yeah, that's a really fun topic. I think in terms of like what the demonic is, I've kind of wavered on that a lot. And there's this book that is too expensive to buy, but there's a great podcast. Like, have you ever heard of the Bible Project?
Yes.
They do like podcasts and YouTube videos. Well, they did a great podcast called The Emergence of Sin. And I definitely recommend it. It's really cool.
Well, let me ask you this then, the speed round on that topic. Do you believe there is a real something entity named Lucifer or Satan?
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know. Because of this idea, it kind of like, about emergence theory, right?
I think so.
Like it's a lot of times it's used in like consciousness. Well, I mean, just put it very simply, like
The consciousness is a emergent property of the
hydrogen and
brain.
oxygen, right? Here's the big dog. Yeah. So like, just hydrogen and oxygen by themselves are two small parts, but kind of what emerges out of, or even just water itself, right? H2O. They're just these H2O molecules, right?
Right.
But like, you don't just get wetness from those two things.
Right.
It just sort of emerges from it. This concept of wetness, which is
how does this apply to Satan?
So he's kind of going off of that in a way and saying that like an amalgamation of sins and evil that result from willful consequences could maybe result in entities, right, that are demonic, but maybe in terms of how they're conscious is very, very different than how we're conscious. You know what I mean? In ways we just don't understand. So
okay,
it's an interesting theory. Like,
let's get back to that. So you're not sure about whether Satan exists or demons. Yeah. Do you believe that there is a place called hell composed of eternal conscious torment?
No, but I do believe in hell, for sure.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a place.
Okay.
But yeah.
Do you believe that there's a place called heaven after you die?
Sort of. I would say no, in a sense.
Do you believe you'll live forever after you die?
If you mean like if we will live
spiritually
forever within time, no, but we will live in eternity, whatever that means. So yeah.
Do you believe some Christians believe that heaven's a place on earth even after you die? Do you believe that this?
I believe our reality, the earth and the universe, will be recreated in terms of resurrection. What that actually looks like, we have no idea.
Do you believe that'll be spiritual or material?
Material.
Okay. So heaven will be material and go on forever?
Yeah.
Haven't
I think that's what,
Do you see what I'm thinking? Do you know what I'm thinking right now?
No.
I've just heard you say that something material can go on forever.
Right. Well, because of its foundation, because of its complete union with God, who is, which God is eternal.
Yeah. I didn't mean that as a gotcha, but to me, I'm thinking to myself, if you believe something can exist eternally going forwards, that's material, why couldn't it exist materially going backwards? In fact, you could even have a God or the concept.
Oh, I actually don't have a problem with that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
As long as there's a God attached to it that can make it happen.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, I do have a problem with that, but in the sense that we're talking about, I think that doesn't interfere with the argument, is I guess the point I'm getting. Like, you can have an eternity past of material creation, but it has to have its source, its foundation in some transcendental existence itself or being itself. And I think that's what we mean when we say God.
Okay.
Now, is that God? Does it have a mind? Those are all other more difficult questions that you'd have to get into.
Do you believe that the Gospels were written in the mid-first century, late first century? Are you okay with the consensus? What do you believe about when the Gospels were written?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say. The scholars are so divided on that. I mean, there is a consensus, obviously, but then I don't think that we always have to agree with the consensus.
If you were reading a gospel, let's say the Gospel of Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you don't have to explain. Just tell me a number. 100% is all of this is history. 0 is none of it's history. What percentage of the Gospel of Mark do you think is history? That includes the parables, so you shouldn't say 100 because, of course, parables are not history.
Okay. I mean, I guess it kind of depends on what you mean or how you want to look at what's history or not. Because I mean,
you got a video camera, we got a time machine, we can go back, and we can videotape it with our own eyes and stuff.
Well, I mean, then it's like 0.
Really?
But
you'd go 0?
Yeah.
I believe more than 0.
I mean, I don't know why. How could it be? Because it's like I feel like if I were to write a historical document on what happened yesterday, it would be almost 0 because it's just just purely through my interpretation. And
maybe you're misunderstanding my question. I'm saying I'm not talking about certainty. I'm talking about what do you believe is historical. So when you open up the Gospel of Mark and you read something, how often do you intuit that this actually happened, and how often do you say, no, this didn't happen in the past?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's not something I've ever really thought about or do I care to do.
Okay.
I mean, so let's take the 10 plagues, right, in the Exodus story. Do I think there was precisely 10 plagues that happened at that time? Probably not. It's very symbolic. There's a lot of meaning hidden behind why the author wrote that stuff down. But do I think something behind that symbolism, behind that metaphor and that narrative did happen that reflects, why these people are writing what they're writing? Yeah, I think something happened historically.
Do you believe Jesus' bodily resurrection is symbolic?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
I'm curious, can you put a number on it? If 100% is it's literal, this happened, bodily resurrection, done, and 0 is, no, this is all symbolism, metaphor. Where are you on that?
Sam, hey, stop. Well, assuming that Christianity is true.
No, we're not assuming that. We're basically, where's your internal sense of confidence on it? Like you said with the history, we can't really know for certain.
Right.
Where are you at with the resurrection?
I mean, I am a Christian, so I have to say 100%.
You don't have to. I've heard Christians say 80, 90.
Yeah.
In fact, Michael Licona, I think I'm right about this. He's a New Testament evangelical historian, and I think he's on record as saying 80%.
Okay.
And so he's given himself quite a bit of wiggle room.
Sure, let's go with that then.
Okay.
80 to 90. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Do you have any speed round questions for me?
Yeah. So do you just assume that our existence itself is just a brute fact?
Why there's something rather than nothing? Yes.
Okay. So is it sort of like the flat world idea again? We're so, we don't have the intelligence to understand that. Is that kind of your basis?
I believe it's a brute fact that we exist. I call it a presupposition. But I do admit that that doesn't mean there can't be a God. There might be a God or supernatural realm, whatever that means.
Sure.
But yeah, I just I don't think it is reasonable to add on a new category of existence to explain something where, in my opinion, every example of existence we have seems material. So why make up something called immaterial or whatever that is to explain something else when maybe it's just an unknown,
Right.
undiscovered, unimaginable type
Yeah,
material?
but you're using your immaterial mind to determine that.
Well, I don't believe so. But so if
But
your question is, do I believe the mind is immaterial? I'd say no.
but you're using your mind to say that.
Well, it depends how you
Right.
define mind. If you define mind as immaterial, then I would say there's no mind. I have no mind if you're defining immaterial that way,
Oh,
or mind that way.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
You see
That's
the dog that just walked behind you?
yeah.
I'm just the super version of that dog.
Right.
I know a lot of Christians they cringe inside when they hear someone say that, but I just think if you accept evolution via common descent, I think that is the conclusion that is more probable, that we have evolved.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that you're assuming a materialistic world, where I think it's more likely that the world is idealistic in a sense.
Rapid fire questions. Just ask me. Like
Sure.
I do assume the first cause is a brute fact, but other than that, we can learn things
Yeah.
about it, build upon it, and so forth.
So there's a book that I wish you would read it. You probably won't because it's kind of hard to read and it's long, but it's called The Experience of God, Being, Consciousness, and Bliss, or something like that.
Oh, I'd
By
probably throw up on
David
that one.
Bentley. What's that?
I'd probably throw up reading that book.
Yeah. It's by David Bentley Hart, but
Oh,
I mean,
especially, yeah. I don't like David Bentley Hart at all.
yeah.
He needs to learn social skills, number one. The way he interacts with people has turned me off so badly on him.
Yeah, I mean, it does. Yeah, his tone is extremely arrogant, even in the book, and I'm sure you wouldn't like it, but I don't like it either. He talks a lot about what we talk about and explains it much better. I would just be interested to hear, what you thought about certain points within it if we had a longer conversation. But anyway, I didn't plan on asking you any rapid fire questions. Yeah, sorry, I don't.
Well, there has to be something like there has to be something in your mind, I think, that says, why is Doug thinking this way, or does he really believe that, and why doesn't he believe?
Yeah, what's your goal with these live streams? What's your goal?
My number one goal is my sheer, unabashedly goal to have entertainment for myself.
Okay.
No, seriously, I know that's shallow, but if I'm not entertained, I'll probably stop this whole YouTube thing. And so entertainment, number one. Number two, to pay for past sins, in quotes. I do think on net, Christianity is more harmful than good. And I know that's saying
On the
that's
internet? Do you mean the internet?
no, in net. Like if you took the pros and the cons.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think all the good stuff of Christianity that you and I would agree on, like love and even trying to do no harm and that sort of thing,
Yeah.
can be achieved without Christianity.
Yeah.
And a lot of the bad stuff, I think, is done because of Christianity that you won't find in other religions or even in no religion. Now, every belief system has its idiots and its good people and bad people and so forth, but I do think that there are certain things about Christianity that causes people to do bad things.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if it would even be possible to somehow take a summation of all the bad things that were done in the name of Christianity versus
Yeah.
in the name of communism, in the name of Islam. I don't know if you could somehow.
I think Christianity is better than Islam on net.
Yeah. Do you think there's another religion that is?
I mentioned Jainism the other day.
What is Jainism? I've heard that. I don't actually know what it is.
Yeah, it's an Eastern religion that is very, very pacifistic. It's almost too overboard. Like they won't even step on an ant and kill it. So,
Right. Yeah.
but if the whole world were Jainist, there would be no
Sure.
wars.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would,
I don't think.
I'm making an assertion, but I would think that if the whole world was Christian, there would be no wars either. If they actually abided by Christianity.
But that's your version of Christianity, like because you don't
Right.
believe that God sanctioned wars in the Old Testament, right?
Right.
I would say you're in the minority in the United States.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
The majority of Christians in the United States support Israel, for example,
Right.
because of end time prophecy and so forth, and so therefore more likely to cause wars with Iran or whoever
Yeah.
because of their religious beliefs and their view of the Old Testament and God's chosen people and all this stuff. It's very dangerous.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. Yeah. Um, let's see. So I asked you what your goal was with the live streams.
But the real goal of that, I sometimes tell people, is to lead the Christian youth to hell.
Oh, of course.
I say that to very conservative apologists,
Yeah.
and it's like I can smile and smirk all I want when I say that, but they take me seriously, and it's like Doug doesn't know how truthful he is when he says that. Like he is dangerous. He's leading people to
Right.
this horrible place called hell forever and ever, and someday his knee will bow, his tongue will confess.
Well, so do you do it? I did hear sort of an idea of that you're trying to do good in the world, right?
Yeah.
By leading people away from Christianity, because in your mind, that actually is going to do more good than harm, right? Okay. So,
but I do acknowledge in some cases might do the reverse.
right. Because if I told you that, if you are able to convince me that Christianity is false today, then I'm going to spiral into this deep depression. If you had a magic 8 ball and you saw, oh, that is true, Jared will cause more harm to his family and himself if he finds out that Christianity is false, then if you knew that, then you wouldn't try to convince me, right?
No, in fact, I'm on record of sincerely telling people to stay in Christianity if I felt that way. If I truly knew that this would happen to you, I'd pray with you right now.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah, and that we have. I feel like I admire that because I think you clearly believe in goodness, and you want the things that we both agree on to be true in a sense, right? You want love to abound, and for suffering to diminish.
See, I feel that love can abound when you break down the tribal barriers as much as possible.
Yeah, totally.
And I think Christianity is one of the most tribal religions out there. It's basically those who walk in the light, those who walk in darkness. It's the us versus them.
Yeah, no, that's why I left evangelical Christianity.
But I think that still exists in Orthodox Christianity too, don't you?
It does, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And not all, but in some Orthodox circles, yeah, Catholic Orthodox, Anglican, it still does, unfortunately. But
so you've seen how I've been treated in the Facebook group.
Yeah.
There's quite a few people there. They will assume the worst of me just because I call myself an atheist.
Right. Yep.
Like I told a joke just an hour ago or 2 hours ago. I told a joke to a guy. Like, I don't know if you saw. I said 1, 2, 3 testing. Is my mic on? I was a happy face, and it's like, why are you mocking me? And it's like, I'm like, I have to be so careful around these people.
I know. We're very sensitive.
When I say these people, I don't mean you. I mean like the evangelical conservative.
I mean, I've been guilty of that stuff. I mean, I'll admit it. And I've especially in the past, I've definitely, I absolutely had an us versus them mentality for the majority of my life. I wouldn't admit it, if you asked me, 5 years ago, if that's how I felt, but it was. And I think the true Orthodox Christianity is that cannot be in true Orthodox Christianity. There is no tribalism in that. It's neither Jew nor Greek, male, female. It is this desire to be in union with all people, as you read in the article I wrote.
Oh, I'll link that in the description, by the way, later.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Yeah. I think, that what I would like to do in the stuff that I write and people I talk to is try to defend that Orthodox Christian message that I think is true. That the us versus them mentality is an anathema to Christianity. It is incompatible, and that's what I want to defend.
Well, I'll tell you, if the whole Christian world was like you, I think the world would be a better place.
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't even have to be Christian. I mean, you could be an atheist or belong to a different religion, but as long as you have that idea that you are going to serve others and think about yourself less, just the standard generic things, self-sacrifice and for love to be primary in your heart and soul, then the world would be a better place. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to say, well, if you don't believe that Jesus died and resurrected, then you're going to hell, or that you're not a good person, and that you can't do those things.
I finish your thought, but I forgot to ask you something about. Finish your thought.
Sure. Yeah, and so I mean, I think that Jesus is the one true way, and I think that all will, through the full knowledge of his beauty and truth and whatever, that we will willingly want to conform to him, right? In other words, embrace our true humanity is what I mean by that. And but I don't think that under certain circumstances that God is necessarily judging us or you or someone because they didn't have that direct knowledge during this life. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you mean. But that seems to go against a lot of scripture.
I think it seems to, but I think you could make a powerful argument that not necessarily, but that's a whole other conversation that I'm not equipped to have.
See, one thing that I struggle for you on your behalf is, I think you're a great version of Christianity, but you believe Jesus is God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I think you reject most of the, what we call the atrocious parts of the Old Testament.
Right.
But I have this time machine thought experiment where if you and I were getting to a time machine and we go back to the first century and you and I find Jesus and we sit down and we all three of us smoke pipes together and we start asking Jesus questions about the Old Testament, wouldn't Jesus say that, God told Moses to do X, Y, and Z and take out the Canaanites, Amalekites, and there was a literal Adam and Eve, and because I mentioned it, when I was talking about marriage, and would you say then that the Jesus we're talking to is just wrong?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the question is, would he, affirm those things?
I think he would, though.
In the language that we speak, you got to remember that the language that they spoke, I don't mean the literal language, but just like the way they saw the world is so foreign to us, in just almost every way. And so, like in terms of like the distinction between the symbolic and the literal, like I feel like it was just so incredibly blurry for them. And
but how do you think Jesus would answer that question? Like, what's your personal belief?
Assuming that he was talking in our language, right? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a really controversial topic. It's, there's this debate over, uh, how much knowledge Jesus had, right? Over like objective reality, or, was he limited in his knowledge by his humanity? That's an open question for sure.
Well,
I don't know if I can answer one way or the other.
and if we answer that way, that Jesus maybe was limited in his knowledge because of his humanity, do you believe that Jesus could sin because he's limited in his humanity?
Yeah. So currently, I could change on this, but currently I'm of the mind, and this is going to get into some really heavy theological speak, but I'm of the mind that Jesus's will was completely natural. He had a natural will and a divine will, and so when we talk about free will, right? And I have another article that it's really short. You should read. It kind of illustrates where I'm coming from on this. But I don't affirm libertarian free will. I also don't affirm determinism.
But you're not a Calvinist. That's amazing to me.
I'm not a Calvinist, which would be deterministic, right?
Yep.
I don't think that's
right. At least the hyper Calvinists are, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think those categories don't even apply, really. So I because I do believe in that kind of teleological nature of all things, that humanity has a specific nature that is shapes our desire, our true desire. And so we think like we desire vanilla ice cream over chocolate ice cream, right? To take something completely arbitrary. But just bear with me, just for the sake of argument. What we actually desire is like strawberry, for example. We just don't know it. And so, the power to choose between those three things, vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry, we have that power, but it's not a truly free will. To be truly free would be to know what you desire. So if what I actually desire because of my nature is strawberry, but I don't know it, then I'm not actually free.
But how does this apply to Jesus? Like, could he have sinned and just chose
Jesus,
not to?
Yeah. So Jesus, his will under this type of thought, right, was completely natural. It wasn't deliberative. So when he was given the choice to follow the will of the Father or not, during the temptations, which really should be better translated as testing, that he didn't have to think about it. There was no deliberation. It was just like, his desire was perfectly aligned with his nature. And so he was, in that sense, ultimately free, completely free. Whereas, we're not completely free.
But could he hypothetically have succumbed to this temptation, is what I'm asking.
So under that scenario, the no, because his will was, aligned with his nature. So there was no possible way for him to succumb.
But I'm hearing a disconnect, though, because if Jesus could, because of his humanity, have limited knowledge and not know things like common descent, evolution via common descent, and be wrong about whether Yahweh actually commanded Moses to kill people.
Right, yeah.
Maybe because of his humanity, he could have sinned.
Right, yeah, I see what you're saying. So I guess the argument there would be that this only applies in terms of morality, maybe, or spirituality. I don't know. I mean, like I said, this is just kind of where I'm at right now. I could totally change in the next week. Yeah.
Well, don't change if it's going to cause you depression.
Right.
Should we wrap it up?
Yeah, I got to get going, and I have to pee really bad anyway.
Well, I thank you so much for doing this impromptu. Most of my live streams are impromptu, but yeah,
Yeah.
this was good. I
No,
hope.
I enjoyed it. Yeah, you definitely gave me a lot of good things to think about. And yeah, I mean, like I said before, I like talking with you. I think you're a great guy. So yeah, it was fun.
You might get some flack though from some people in the Facebook group who are more evangelical leaning. But
Sure.
I'll be there to
They don't scare me.
I'll be there to defend you. Okay, take care. All you have to
Yeah.
do is press X, and I've already linked it in the live stream chat, and I'll also link it in the description. I thought it was a good article.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, appreciate it.
Okay, hopefully you'll feel better soon as well.
Yeah, me too. All
Okay, take care.
right, see ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay. That was fun. I like talking to different types of Christians. Let me increase that. As you can tell, there's a huge difference in Christianity. Thank you for any donations that I missed. I think to sum up, I think he believes what he believes because it gives him explanation. He mentioned first cause, the whole idea of ideals, goodness, morality. Gives him a basis, a foundation, explanation. So my question to the atheists out there is, if you knew you could deconvert a guy like this, would you do it? Especially if his beliefs gives him hope, meaning, purpose, explanation. Would you do it? Darkin says, I wouldn't even bother trying to dissuade Christians if they all believed like him. Adam says, nah. Heath says, nah. Jefferson says, nope. You hear that, Christians listening? No matter what type of Christian you are, there's atheists out there who are okay with you staying a Christian. Some, Kevin Shea said I would. But it depends. Chet would say yes. I don't know where I am on that one. Maybe I'll tell you next live stream. Poof. Thanks for hanging out with me.